I am Jim Collison, and this is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on January 26th, 2022. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live, we'd love to have you join us in our chat room. Link right above me there on our live page. Sign in with your Google account. Join us in chat. You can ask your questions live. If you're listening after the fact on a podcast or maybe on YouTube, you can send us your questions, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And you can subscribe right there on YouTube, bottom right-hand corner there. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Maureen Monte is my guest today. She focuses on highly motivated corporate and sports teams. She's a Gallup-Certified strengths coach, has degrees in both engineering and leadership. She is the author of the book Destination Unstoppable, which Maureen, that's been out a couple of years now, right? We did a whole podcast on that. Congratulations. And we're going to talk some more about that moving forward. But I'm a little excited, and maybe we'll hint at this towards the end. Soon to be released book, The Win Like a Girl Project, which I'm particularly interested in. So let's save that as we get to the end. Maureen, thanks for coming out today. Welcome to Call the Coach.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here.
So great to have you. It's like old friends. We've been doing this together for a very long time and have spent a lot of time together. And during this series, I didn't start it as a series. I joke sometimes. I just take what the universe gives me. And all of a sudden, I started booking coaches for Call to Coach that had all this experience. And so you're number two. Brent was on a couple of weeks ago. Brent O'Bannon was with us. You're coming on. We've got Charlotte Blair lined up in a couple of weeks. So starting to work through some coaches with some experience. Let's talk about your experience, but let's start with your top five. And what I'm kind of interested is we think about your coaching through the lens of your top five. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Just real quick before I do, my sister Blanca Garcia is on this, and she's my sister from Mexico, even though we're not formal, we are sisters. But she was my instructor for certification, along with Kurt Liesfeld, our beloved Kurt. So it's now the pressure's on for me to do a good job. So
it is indeed.
I'm thrilled she's here. So I just want to say thank you. So my top five: strategic, right? So that helps me plot where we're going or connect dots. Ideation, I think that's number one actually, is ideation. And then ideation, so I'm an idea machine. Not all ideas are good ideas, but at the time I think they are. And then learner, which of course I love to learn new things and switch careers frequently. And achiever, that's a real problem, right? Don't manage that well in any aspect of my life. And individualization, which I think helps me both appreciate people and their natural talents and customize solutions to the client, maybe to a point of being too customized, but it works for me.
No, I know sometimes we play the humble card and we say those kinds of things, but all of those themes really drive you to success, right? You really find that individualization helps people feel like you care about them specifically, and that matters.
Right? I do.
You do. So I do appreciate that, but I think it's way more powerful than you give yourself credit for. Can you give us an update, just really quick? Give us an update. I mean, you wrote this book, Destination Unstoppable, and it kind of became an operating system for you in a lot of ways. Can you talk a little bit about some of those successes or some of those high points that have come out of that work that you've done with Destination Unstoppable?
Yeah. And, you used the word system, and that is what it is. It is a system, right? If you follow this system, your team will, if its team starts here and you end here, your team will be better off, right? Without exception.
Yeah.
Now, not all people make the journey at the same speed, but without exception, your team will be better off. And one of the things that I get feedback from sports coaches about it, and while it is a sports story, it's a team success story. I do the same thing with all my teams. What they tell me is they like that it's a system, right? So as they become strengths knowledgeable through my work with them, and then they do it on their own, which I'm perfectly happy with. But they tell me then that enables them to do it. The Win Like a Girl project, and I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but I will say up front that it's not a book about the Strength Finder. One of the challenges that coaches told me and corporate people told me is if they didn't know, with Destination Unstoppable, if they didn't know the Strength Finder language, it made it harder to appreciate. Mm-hmm. So Win Like a Girl is not going to be like, oh, here's how many had restorative, here's how many had woo, it's going to be what they had to a degree, a comparison between male and female, 505 athletes on both sides. So I've now worked with 1,500 athletes and coaches. And so, but I'll share, what the advantage for the male athlete looks like and what the advantage for the female looks like and what they both have in common, but using regular language, right? And it again is a system. I had to adapt for the female athlete teams and the female athletes. They have a different set of problems, and I'll speak more about that in a moment if you want. But overall, it's helping individuals and teams reach their full potential. Yeah. There will be a Destination Unstoppable 2 about last year's Cranbrook hockey team, which was the best team I've ever worked with. And best team for me isn't just that they won. That's nice they did. But they won with less talent, and they won through unification, love of one another, hard work, survival through COVID. They did things that if I could get all teams to do, they would be better off as well. So I'll write about that someday. They weren't very big. They're my size. And they won.
Yeah, that's great. That's it harks back to the 1980 Olympic hockey game, U.S. versus the Soviet Union, right? And you think that, and so great story. When does the Win Like a Girl project stuff come out?
It's in editorial review right now with coaches, sports coaches, right? And but what I'm thrilled about, and I'm going to jump ahead. This is, of course,
we're talking about it. Let's just do it.
So what I'm thrilled about is, as the coaches are reading it, so at the core of Win Like a Girl is a fear management process. And what I found so astonishing was how fearful female athletes were compared to male athletes. And then you add to that social media, the fact that parents don't prepare the child for the road, they prepare the road for the child. They never face an obstacle, hopefully, and that's what parents hope for, and I totally disagree with that, right? But and then COVID, and then school closings. So it's just been a fascinating, not just the comparison between the strengths of the two, male and female athletes, but then the journey for success for a female athlete is vastly different from male. So at the core of it is a fear management process.
Yeah.
But as the funny thing is, female coaches suffer from some of the same challenges. So here's one of the coaches emailed me this morning, and she's reading it, right? And so she said, after reading chapter 7, she said, you'd been so proud of me today. After reading chapter 7, which I can't even remember which chapter that is, it gave me confidence into today's small altercation. Altercations are good. That means you're standing up for yourself. With the men's baseball coach and our strength conditioning coach. They were told they couldn't. So, and she said, I said to myself, no way. I read chapter 7. I will not let this stop me. And she went right at him, right? And a couple of things. The team sees it. Now we see a female coach standing strong. The goal of Win Like a Girl is it's a confidence and courage development program so that they become champions at the game of life. Because there's always going to be a jerk you work for. Somebody's going to do something stupid on social media. You'll be followed by someone around a store. There's any number of things you need to do to take good care of yourself. So it's about that steel spine thing that I'm trying to build and to play like a pack of wolves, which is what I want them to do. She said, anyhow, that's what I get this morning. Right. So in the past, she would have deferred. And no. I said to you yesterday, as we were talking about the prepping for this, and I'd been to a Gallup summit where Johnny Taylor is the head of the HR organization,
sure.
a black man.
Yep.
And what he said when I was in Nebraska in Omaha, he said, if you want a seat at the table, you have to speak up. And that is critical. And that's what this coach did. And through my work with teaching courses at Cornell's Leadership and Development Program for tech and engineering executives, the female executives were doing the same thing. They would sit at the table and be afraid to raise their hand and express their view because they were worried about the guys were going to think.
Mm-hmm.
You're a vice president. You are paid to make decisions. You are paid to speak up, and you are paid to lead your team. So let's figure out how we do that, right? But so it's fascinating to me that in my work with STEM, I've seen some of the similar things.
Yeah, and STEM, we won't spend too much more time on this, but STEM is with COVID, all the work we did. I do a lot of work here in the city of Omaha on STEM education opportunities around that really went backwards again. So we're going to have to kind of get as we get through this, get back after it. I think there's some great opportunities there. We wanted to spend a little. Maureen, I think that's a great intro to you, by the way. I think everyone this is great because everyone just heard your passions, what you stand for, what you're about, and kind of what you're doing. So I think that was a great introduction. We've got a couple lessons learned, and I think I kind of asked you to speak to our certified coaching community, from coaches who are just certified, newly certified, just went through the training, to those that have been around, a while, right? So some lessons learned for us. There's some basic assumptions. So why don't you lay those out first, and then we'll go through these lessons.
Basic assumptions. So I'm assuming, to me, for the things I'm going to speak about after, this is the foundation, right? Number one is that you know yourself, because I know self be true, right? And you know your why, and you're extremely clear about it, both with yourself and so knowing your strengths and all, but not knowing, but also doing, right? Using them in your work. And you're clear about that and communicating it to your clients. And I use, one of the things I use is I have on my website a vision, mission, and purpose statement. And that's my North Star. If what I'm doing does not fall under those things, then I shouldn't be doing it, right? So I recommend you craft those, and they're an asset to share with clients as well, right? But it's got to be you. Mine isn't yours. So build one that's for you. It's on my About Me page on my website, MaureenMonte.com. 2, know your craft via practice, right? Be good at what you do. And it isn't just your strengths knowledge, which I think we've all got good stuff there. And that's your ticket to the game. But what else do you bring to the table? So my background in engineering, my background in leadership, entrepreneurship, I taught for Cornell, I work with the University of Michigan's entrepreneurial program. Those are all things I have done because I am part of that. But I don't do all things, right? So, but the other thing I bring, and I always have to have show and tell. I highly recommend people do this because I think it's helpful to teams. So this is, which you will not be able to read, but this is out of the Wall Street Journal, the top selling books, fiction, nonfiction, and business hardcover. And in the business hardcover, of course, we always see StrengthsFinder 2.0, which is why I continue to call it StrengthsFinder. So I know that. So forgive me for my faux pas, but I will continue to do it till I die.
I'll cut that part out.
I don't blame you.
Or I'll just dub over CliftonStrengths
in your own voice.
That's right.
Better. But you find Atomic Habits. So imagine layering StrengthsFinder on the other things, right? Atomic Habits. The one I use a lot lately is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, 2 Navy SEALs. And let me tell you, every leader should read Extreme Ownership. Because if you are 100% responsible for what your team does, and your team understands that everybody's 100% responsible for what they do, that is really empowering. Now, it's hard. It can be hard to get buy-in. But I did that with a high school hockey team this year. They read Extreme Ownership as a team, book study. Then the season starts. They're very good. And they only win 1 game and they lose 4. And then we meet. Now, mind you, they studied Extreme Ownership. And I give people pre-work. I give all my clients pre-work. And it's a test. Do you have enough commitment to the team to do the pre-work? It's also useful information that I get when they do it. And it became clear in this workshop, we want to win the state championship and we work hard and we blah, blah, blah. And then when we talked about the pre-work, they hadn't done it. So the coach came to me and said, this is so typical of these guys. They say it, but they don't do it. And so I said, all right, let's have once he told me that, I said, okay, just be honest with me. Raise your hand if you actually did the pre-work. Three young men. So I said, well, maybe only 3 of you are showing up for lifting weights or preparing for a great game, or maybe. Is that why you've lost 4 games? So I said, listen, and part of extreme ownership is me owning my thing. I didn't check to see if you did the pre-work before we started. That's my fault. It's your fault you didn't do the pre-work. We both failed, and now the mission's failed. So we had that discussion. They've gone 9 and 2 since. But you have to get real frank sometimes. With
well, and I think I was talking to a group of coaches just yesterday, and I think even sometimes when we think about our strengths reports, that so we get these people to finally take CliftonStrengths, and they then we hand them their reports, then we spoon feed them the analysis, then we tell them what it means instead of letting them take ownership. And did you do the pre-work? I know a lot of coaches that give pre-work for the very first conversation they're going to have, and we're so afraid that they're gonna walk away. But we really, in some ways, want them. We want that high ownership. That's what I hear you saying, is
absolutely
high ownership in the process. And I think that's a lesson in itself. By the way, I know
a
for
life
some
lesson.
things, yeah, I'm really hesitant to buy something until I get to the point where it really bothers me that I don't have it. It's one of those kinds of things where I think, oh, if I just would have had it, that might be an indicator that I need it, as opposed to trying to have everything available in the moment. I bought so many things and I was like, I never used them because I didn't really need them, right? And so I think a great life lesson in there. Let's dig into some of these lessons, by the way.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm already off track again.
No, there is no off track on Called to Coach. What's lesson number 1?
Lesson number 1. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Identify, embrace, tackle, and solve the hard problems. That's where the value is to the client. I am paid to get to the root of hard problems for clients. That is why they are paying me. The tip of the iceberg is not where the gold is. The gold is deeper than that. And we got to get to the whole iceberg, because no team is unsinkable. No team is unsinkable. So this next real brief case study was with a large multi-billion-dollar company. So they're not small potatoes, they're big potatoes. And big potato companies have big potato problems. All right. So I was brought in to help with a CEO and his direct reports that are global around the United States, and then a couple in Europe, to basically play like a team, right? We had new people, we had a reorg. There's a series of things this team had not coalesced. And a fragmented team will underperform a united team every time. So I come in and I explain, we'll do Destination Unstoppable. We'll identify strengths. We'll build a team trust bank and commit to a team trust bank. We will define success, and everyone will be valued for being valuable. Because at the root of Destination Unstoppable is a third string goalie that never played a game, who helped that team win in other ways, right? So, but whenever I work at the top of a heap, at the top of a house of a large company like that, I always do individual coaching first, which is just not rocket science, right? There's egos, there's concerns. We know they're not coalesced. So those all went very well, with the exception of one. And when we did his debrief, he was delightful, but he's cautious. His strengths reflect his cautiousness. And he said, so tell me about the team workshop we're going to have. So the plan was individual coaching, team workshop, more work, and then we have another workshop. That was the plan. And I said, well, we'll take a look at everybody's top 10, and we'll see what it means. What does it mean to you? What it means to me? What it means to the group? And he goes, you're going to share my results? I said, yes. He goes, no. And I said, why don't you want people to know what makes you great? No, it's none of their business. It's none of their business. So this goes on, and I'm laughing. I don't care. We'll figure it out, is my take. But I said, well, aren't you curious about their strengths? He paused, but then he says, no, right? He's not. And then he said, but I'll bet you the head of HR has empathy. I said, well, I would love to discuss that with you, but we're not ever going to share our strengths, so that wouldn't be possible. And he said, you're trying to manipulate me. I said, if you have questions about her strengths, you go talk to her, right? And so I left it at that. I let it go. I explained to her. We got him to agree to the top 10. But I bet you today, and this was a few months ago, I bet you today he's not shared his whole profile with other people on the team. But that's his problem, right? So, but you got to get through those hard problems, right? So then we meet as a team. And the goal was, with pre-work, of course, I want to know what success looks like for this team, what the challenges are, and a few other questions I do that's part of the pre-work. And I thought we'd get through the strengths, success for the team, and the challenges. We didn't. It was the first time they'd been together since COVID started. So it's been a year and a half since they'd been together. And we only got through the strengths, right? And a little bit of the others, but that's okay. Because once the magic starts, let the magic continue, right? I didn't interrupt, think it was something was going very, very well. And one of the things I like to do with team analysis is I slice and dice. So I show all 14, 15 people's top 10, and then what they have in common and what the makeup looks like, this percentage is relationship building, et cetera, et cetera. But I slice and dice by gender, by org, any slice and dicing that can help with understanding and insight, right? And so then I begin to just ask questions. What do you think it means that nobody has included in their top 10 on this team, right? Look at the two different organizations. Look how different you are, right? They then start to ask questions. They're laughing. They're talking to one another. I just let it go. So that went very well. Great. Then there was work in between. And I, at halfway through, we were meeting 3 months later because they got to come from all over. They don't meet together very often. And I have them give me feedback like, today, what is the current state of your team trust bank? If you had to scale on a scale of 1, where it's low, to 10, where it's great, what is it? And they all sent me their responses along with their justification, as well as what are the challenges this team faces. And so I'm getting 15 different perspectives. One person says it's an 8, another person says it's a 2. I know who said the 2. Not that it matters. It's his experience, right? So I put it all in a document. I remove all the names. It is a long document. Now I have 15. And I shared it with the CEO and the HR. And my job is to provide insight, right? And I talked about what I thought I saw, asked them what they thought. And then I said, I personally think we should share this raw document, raw data with everybody before we meet again. It gives them time to think about it, right? So then we have the second, they agreed, to their credit, they agreed. And then we have the next meeting, right? And it was a lunch, very brief, a build blankets for the homeless team building thingy over lunch. And then we start at 1. Well, my problem child doesn't show up on time. And then he would still like to slowly eat his chicken salad outside the room. And the CEO and everybody else is ready. I said, it's 1 o'clock. It's my workshop. It's my house. I said, we're starting. I kind of yelled at him. And he said, I'll be there in a minute. I said, we're starting now. And I started. And he didn't like it, right? I don't care. This is my job. You are supposed to be here. It's disrespectful to the CEO. It's a withdrawal from the team trust bank. And everybody else is here. So get in here. So, and here's what happened. I've never had anything like it. I stood in front of the room and I said, so why don't we just start with, I shared all the data, right? The stuff you said. What'd you guys think? Well, it began. And we finally got to the gold of this, what this team needed. I stood there for 2.5 hours and never said another word. So success.
They began to dialogue.
They
Is that they began to talk it through? Maureen, sometimes that can, I mean, you have to kind of referee when it begins. You got to kind of referee that a little bit too to make sure it stays fairly positive, right? When you're getting to the heart of problems, though, it's not always positive, right?
It isn't, and it's direct. And there were some, swearing and some real examples. I have to get 17 levels of approval to give someone a $50 gift certificate, right? I mean, we're talking about these basic things, right? So it was very, very good. And I would never have let it get completely out of hand, but I'm willing to let it to get a little bit direct, right? So anyhow.
So with your hockey background, what you're saying is you allow them to fight a little bit.
You do. I mean, sometimes you need to clear the air. And there are people, I was reading about the other day, and I used this once in another company, and it didn't go over well. But the way you get a mule's attention is to hit him with a 2x4, right? And so there are some people that needed to be hit by a 2x4, right? They've been there a long time. They have their own opinions. It's all right. So it was great. And I got feedback it was terrific. You made your and they described it, my expert command of the content, which at that point I didn't even talk, but prior to that. But the point is the strength, Clifton Strengths helps them. It's the foundation for everything else, but the goal is in the dialogue around it. So I encourage people to find that place where they're adding value on top of or along the chain that and I like a system. The system for me has worked. And I am not a disciplined person. We were talking about that, but this system works. All right.
Let me in lesson 2, you talked a little bit about knowing what success looks like in that group. If we can just stay with that,
Okay.
at what point, because this is tough, like this is the hardest part of coaching, especially in the sense of the corporate coaching group world. At what point did you define or did you know success metrics for this team? Did you have those before this conversation? Did you know where you were going before it? Did they come out of it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We had done some rough stuff in our first workshop on what success looks like for this team. I don't define it, although my objective is always the same. A winning team. I build winning teams. Unified, overcomes obstacles, and achieves goals. That's what it is for me. That's what success looks like for this team. Theirs is up to, they have to own it. So I never tell people what to do or how to do it, but they came up with the things that they needed, and it was unity, which has been a problem. It always is with teams, and then also kind of some inclusiveness kind of stuff, and of course we'll get included, right? So one of the things they said is we have a culture of nice, and the culture of nice isn't working when solving these business problems. It's been a challenging couple of years, right, for everybody, especially including this company. So getting them to embrace what success looked like for this team. So they sent that to me, and then I kind of did a rough draft based on that, wordsmithed a little bit, shortened it. People said similar things but not identical. Does that cover it? And at the end of the day, they had a statement that they owned that included both what they want to do as the team. This is not your numbers per se. It's not goals like we have to sell this much, but it's what this team must do and how you behave to get there. That's what a success statement is in my book, right? That will get you the business metrics, but we have to agree to these things. It's a little bit of an operating principle statement.
We should clear up some cultural misconceptions just really quick. So Justin is in the UK. They probably have different measurements. 2x4 is you could
Yes,
say
Justin.
a stick. You could say a stick.
A big thick stick.
I think, Maureen, I think when we think about defining metrics and then holding to those metrics, like we're going to hold at all costs and we're going to get team unity and we're going to do this. I think there's a fear, and Catherine brings up this fear. Have you ever had an experience where that approach backfired, right? You come in hard, you come in hot, and then it doesn't quite work. How as a coach do you particularly, how do you handle that situation where you're like, oh, this isn't going well?
First of all, coming in hard and hot is always even though I'm combative, as you know, with low harmony, it's the last resort. It's when nothing else has worked. And to Catherine's excellent point, I worked with a executive in the automotive industry, female, who was notoriously late to meetings or just didn't show up at all. For her team, even. We met. We were supposed to meet, and I was there on time. And she texted me and she said, I'm on my way. 15 minutes passed. Now we're 15 after when we're supposed to be there. And she comes strolling in, perfect lipstick applied. She's got a Starbucks coffee. And we have an ineffective strength conversation. They were trying to get her to change her behavior, they meaning HR. They asked me to meet with HR, her boss, and her. Okay? And I'm good with that, right? So far, I'm remaining nice, okay? And she doesn't show for that meeting. The head of HR is a VP. And so I said, well, did you make it clear to her? So clear expectations are critical, right? And accountability is critical. And I said, did you make it clear to her that she had to be there at, let's say, 2:00 whenever we were meeting? And her manager said, well, I added you to the invite and I hoped that would send the right message. I'm like, she's never going to hear that, right? You got to hit her with a 2x4 moment. And I said, I think you need something stronger. I might have even used the words hitter by the 2x4. But they were afraid to challenge her. And she wins, right? And they've got a
Well,
team suffering.
that's really common. I mean, that is
Yeah.
a common, it is the confrontation is difficult. Listen, we could spend hours on conflict resolution, conflict management. In fact, we spent some time with Alicia Santa Maria talking about this last year in
She's
conflict
amazing.
resolution. So, yeah, we won't pretend to get to the root. I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road, and I think it gets
It is. And
very,
here's the
very
deal with a
difficult.
team trust bank. This is where a team trust bank works. It's an accountability tool. You don't have to say you're a rotten manager, woman, and your teams hate you, and we're really struggling with figure out what to do with you. But if you say, actually, not showing up is disrespectful and withdrawal from the team trust bank, and we've committed to making deposits only to the team trust bank, then you can hold them accountable that way.
Mm.
But you got to do it every single time. You both show gratitude when there's a deposit in the team trust bank, and you challenge withdrawals. And it can be done nicely, but you can say, for me, that was withdrawal from the team trust bank. For someone who's more sensitive, I'm not sensitive, but not showing up is utterly disrespectful.
Yeah.
Right? That's a withdrawal.
That's a really good concept. I think, very similar to, we have this idea of a drop in the bucket,
Yeah.
right? So in relationships, a deposit into the trust bank, and then you just made it withdrawal,
Yeah.
and it does allow to have that kind of conversation in a more, with a little bit more, I guess, easier words for folks to work through. So you had another example as we think about these setting, and defining success metrics and how that's helpful. You had another example. Can you share that one with us
Um,
from your
is this
book?
lesson number 2?
Yeah, number 2. Yeah, that's what we're in number 2. A little behind the scenes. We're in
Okay.
2 in the outline.
Oh, yes, of course. Let me
Yeah.
do that. It is actually quite similar. I explained that at the core of Win Like a Girl is a focus on confidence and managing fear. But let's talk about how hard this is for young people to positions of authority,
Mhm.
right? So when you have to pull the trust bank card, violation card on an adult, on a person in authority, that can be hard. And this was one of the chapters in Win Like a Girl is a start to the end season of a girls lacrosse team I worked with. They had won the state championship for the 2 years prior. We'd worked together. And this year they were like 1-6 or something, a terrible start to the season. 1 win, 6 loss. And they're all panicking. Parents are coming to me. What's wrong with this team? We had a late start to getting together, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm like, maybe nothing's wrong. There were a lot of new girls, right? Younger girls. So long story short, as part of it, our journey from disaster to some really great success was that they played well in the first half, but not in the second. And so the more I focused on the second half itis, no one could give me any clarity why this was a problem, right? Why are we behaving this way? So I said, let's have another meeting. I have a good relationship with the head coach, not so good with the 2 assistant coaches, which is another story. But and so we met, and I said, what's up with the second half itis, right? No one speaks. So right then, you've got the iceberg that's sinking the team, right? So I said, you guys know. So I need to know. There's wisdom in this team. You have to share it with me so I can help you. And the one somebody mumbles. The coaches are always so negative. I said, oh, okay. So coaches are negative. That is a global broad statement. Thank you. Now we have a place to start. Give me a specific example. So now somebody's got to call, say a coach, explain why a coach is negative, right? And so this freshman raises her hand and real clear, she goes, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, when I was trying to learn a new defense thingy, I asked a question, my question was met with sarcasm. And you could see her tears starting up. And she said, I don't appreciate, right? And so I'm like, I went right over, hand on the shoulder. Good job. That took courage to say it. And that is specific. But now I have to decide what to do next, right? I could see the coach that I think it is fuming. It's not the head coach that behaved that way. And so I thought for like 1 millisecond, this is where ideation kicks in. I said, do you guys know the root of the word sarcasm? And they didn't. I said, going by memory, I believe sarcasm is Latin for tearing the flesh. When you are with your friends and you're having fun and you're learning and you're just having a good time, be as sarcastic as you want. In a learning and growth environment where you're trying to move out of your comfort zone, and having a coach be sarcastic about your very valid question, you were confused, is a withdrawal from the team. Trust me. We don't make withdrawals. And when we do, I said, so let's talk about what happens next. What if it's a withdrawal? Everybody makes mistakes. Coach makes mistakes. I make mistakes. You guys make mistakes. But when there's a withdrawal, fix it. Apologize. Say, I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. Because when you do that, that's a deposit. Withdrawal becomes a deposit, right? So that's where, and then they went on, and in the book I explain what happened, but we got through it.
I love that the visualization on that, and I think that deposit based on the initial withdrawal can actually be more powerful. In other words, you pull it, it's been pulled out. That's not ideal, but when you put it back in, the process of doing that creates, and I don't know if it's linear or exponential, but it creates growth in that to be able to say, listen, I've been plenty sarcastic in my in my responses to people. And the opportunity, this is an area I probably even in the work that I do, of admitting, yeah, you know what, I was very sarcastic, and I'm sorry, I was trying to get this point across. That's not the right way to do it. Perfect. Or wasn't appropriate. It's out. Sorry about that. Let's move forward. Right. I think that can have some really, that in itself is a success metric in some regards.
It is.
Right?
And what we want out of that is, my goal is that all my teams run like a pack of wolves, corporate and sports. We don't care. They will never run like a pack of wolves if you have discouraged morale and low morale. They will not join the pack. So we need the pack, and we don't need to care who gets the wolf. Okay? So, who gets the elk, like they're chasing an elk, right? A pack of wolves is chasing an animal. We don't need to care who takes the animal down. The pack, everyone will get to eat. So the pack of wolves, the strength of the wolf is the pack, the strength of the pack is the wolf. We need both. But they're always this. And that's the success metric. Did we get there? And did they then play like and fight like a pack? So that's the goal.
Yeah, it is by far, I think, the hardest. All these things, Maureen, this stuff is this is difficult stuff. I think sometimes the magic of coaching, I think we think, is that moment when someone, sees their top 5 for the first time and they begin to talk about themselves and the heavens open up and angels sing.
And that is great.
It is great. It is great, but it's just the beginning of a very difficult process of working through, right? Of working through. And I know many of the coaches listening today know that, but I think it's a great reminder to us of that. Are we okay? Can we move on to number 3? Because I want to dig into this a little bit. Maybe it'll be short. I might make it long.
Fair enough.
So let's talk about lesson number 3.
So trust the process, right? You've got a process, trust the process. I just turned down a 6-month engagement, and I rarely turn down engagements unless I think I cannot add the value that they need. And there was something about their perspective that I frankly felt was counter to a strengths discussion. It'd be like saying you can only have Maximizer and be part of this team, right? And I talked about it a little bit. I thought about it, and I'm like, no, they're not ready for this. But there's someone else can help them, and I referred them to someone else, and I did it with harmony and diplomacy, and that in itself is, because I wanted to tell them all I thought they were nuts, but I didn't do that, and so that's good news. So trust the process, though. Trust that your process, know where it works, right? Yeah. My goal is to bring my best game to the client, and I'm looking for those right places. Someone asked if I was an athlete. Yes, I was, right? And that does help. But what I love about sports teams is they are all in, and they value the strength of a pitcher. They don't try to make a pitcher a catcher or a goalie a major goal scorer, right? So there's part of that too. But I wanted to just emphasize that you can do everything right and still not win the game. But trust the process, because even if you're not there when at the end of the game and you think, man, I don't know, and only some of the people made the journey, right? So you can have a group of dehydrated horses that need to drink at the fountain, but not all of them will, right? And so maybe they need a little more, they need to be thirstier for a little bit longer. No matter how desperately they need help, they have their own agenda, or they don't want the team to succeed. They may not even want the leader to succeed. And I ran into that recently. But know that at some point it will stick. It will stick, and you don't need to be there to see it. And sometimes I hear about how the horse got religion and drank some water from the horse itself, an athlete or a coach or a leader coming to me and telling me about it. Or I hear about it from parents, or a corporate executive will tell me about how someone finally got on board with something. That's all great, right? So you trust that your process is working, even if you're not there to see it, right? And I explained one quick example. I worked with a hockey player, and he was part of the Destination Unstoppable 2 team, the best team ever. But I worked with him from 9th grade to when he graduated in June. And as I explained to you, Jim, he started his career in the penalty box and he ended his career in the penalty box. And despite our many conversations about how unhelpful it is to be in the penalty box, it's a withdrawal from a team. Trust me, you don't score from the penalty box. Last time I checked, nobody scores a goal from there. So when he was a freshman, we discussed it, and he was excited about his strengths, and there was a lot of horsepower there, right? A lot of influencing talent. And then his sophomore year, we talked about, what can you do to not retaliate? I swear if another guy looked at him, he was retaliating for it. So, and he said, he was studying algebra at the time, and he said, if I turn my skates 45 degrees, I can skate away. I said, well, turn your skates 45 degrees. I always make the athlete come up with ideas. Then they own the solution. They need to own the solution, right? So I'm not there to tell them. But so we did that. That would help a little. And then he was a junior, and he's like, I'm a junior now. I'm like, yes, and people look to you for leadership. So think of that when you're yelling at the ref. So if we can try buttoning that up, that would be good. And then in his senior year, each time we made, I would say, like 10% progress per year. Not great, but 10%. And there were times I would say to him, you are the best. Coaches said, you're the best player on the team sometimes, but not in the belly button. Right. So the Destination Unstoppable 2 team comes and they play, and they're not that talented, but man, they continue to win. They continue to win. And they're going to win the state final 4-1. And with 9 seconds left, he gets a penalty. I wanted to kill him. And his kids are laughing in the stands, and he's in the penalty box laughing his head off. I'm just like, oh my God, I never, it's a failure. I'm a failure. And then over the summer, maybe August or about August, I got a text from him in the middle of the night. And he said, Maureen, I just played my first junior hockey game, and that's where you go before you go to college to play. And I put everything you taught me to use, and I stayed in the game. And I think that might have been the only game he ever played from start to finish where he didn't end up in the penalty box. I don't know. But I reply, oh, I'm so proud of you. Good for you, So you just never know. And even if you don't know, trust that some seeds have been planted.
Derek asks a great question along this. He says, with my strategic thinking themes, how do you not fall into the temptation to change the process if you didn't win, right? Even if you have a reputable process, how do you stay true to that? You stay the course, go the distance, right? How do you?
The force is with you.
Any just driving through Iowa. So how do you do that?
I think, first of all, from a team standpoint, they do start here and they end here. It has never, as a team, failed to make them higher performing. And at the individual level, I try to hold them accountable. And that doesn't make them bad people if they're not ready, but they will be ready someday. So it's just my belief, perhaps it's true that I've been doing this since 2006 in a similar fashion, right? That I've never seen it utterly fail across an entire team ever. And we've had hard conversations, and we make this much progress rather than this much progress. And remember what winning looks like to me. A unified team that overcomes obstacles and achieves their goals. That's what winning looks like to me. So
if they get to the end of the season and they didn't make the state championship, but
I could care less.
Okay.
I could care less. They care, right? Because especially the male athletes. because they're so competitive, but I could care less. And I say that to them. I love you either way. I don't care if you win. And they don't like me to say that because it's so important to them. I'm like, I don't care, but I want to see unification. I want to see a wolf pack out there.
Maureen, I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question. I think it's a hard one, but I want to ask it anyways. At the very highest levels, when coaches don't perform, in other words, the defined success is winning, so to speak, and they don't. Many at the highest levels are just fired immediately. As a coach, now we don't see that happening in the corporate sense, or maybe we do in some regards. But as a coach, in the experiences you've been through in these highly competitive environments, when they're not winning, how do you keep from quitting and saying, maybe I'm not everything I think I should be with this. Yeah,
how do I do that?
How do you do that?
First of all, I think to me it goes back to extreme ownership. Have I done every single thing I could? Have I owned the relationship with a coach? And I had a team last year. Oh, the coach. The girls, though, I'd worked with for years, right? And I could either give up on the whole thing, or I could continue to work with those girls because they desperately wanted me to. There were workshops she did not show up to, the coach. But I did not do everything I could have to improve the relationship with her. I got so frustrated with the very few conversations I had that I could get her to have with me. But I could have gone to the athletic director and said, help me understand what's going on with her, right? There are things I could have done that I didn't do. So I need to own it. And then there are other reasons. The team needs it, even if she isn't getting it. And the question will be, what do I do this year? Because she's going to be the head coach again. We'll see. But it's a very interesting, it can be very hard, but I want to own 100% of what I can do to make it work.
It's never perfect, right? I think sometimes we think we're going into these things, it's going to work this way. They're going to win the national championship. It's going to be great. And
look at the playoffs of any sport.
Yeah.
It's rarely the team they thought, right?
Right.
So this is why we play the game. And winning twice is hard if you've won a championship.
Right.
I don't know that this year's Grand team will do it. They have more talent, but right now they're not a wolf pack, right? So, but still, the journey, and I had this disagreement's not the right word. I met with the captains this year, and I said, winning the state championship doesn't change your life. They're like, it does too. It does too. I said, it doesn't. Did you get more money? Did you get a better grade? New job? The high school player, right? No. But playing like a pack of wolves, becoming utterly unified, and pursuing a state championship like a pack of wolves, that changes your life. Because you can do that anywhere. Right? So that's what I try to do.
I love that. Maureen, as we think about the corporate space, and you've got a lot of experience in the corporate space as well, there isn't a state championship. No. There isn't a Super Bowl. There isn't a FIFA championship, whatever they call it, in soccer or in football. How do you just some thoughts on driving teams to success where those big events don't necessarily exist? Any thoughts on that?
Well, but they do. Show me a business, including nonprofits, and they're harder to get on this page, that isn't competing with somebody else. Business is a competitive sport. You are trying to win something. You're trying to win market share. You're trying to win number of clients. You're trying to win. And somebody else is trying to take your elk from you, right? There are wolves everywhere pursuing the same stuff. So that I just help them make that mind shift, right? It is harder, especially in today's environment where people are more easily offended, right? So, but I'm straightforward about it.
When you're working with leadership teams at the C level, do you use financials as success metrics to say ultimately market share or units moved or total revenue in some of those? Because the results of teams working better together, right? The results of people knowing and understanding who they are and being able to do that with their teammates can have and should have a direct, we know through the Gallup path that should have a direct revenue Do you spend much time? I think some folks are afraid to go that way because
No, I'm not afraid to go that way, but I would say there's the formal system of success and there's the human system of success. And this is way more likely, the financials, the employee engagement even, right? If the human system of success is working well. And so it deserves equal attention. And we don't even say the word team chemistry in the corporate world. It should, because that's the human system of success, right? So I'm real clear about, let's get clear on the formal system, which is, by the way, your ticket to the game. If you can't play hockey, you can't do accounting, and you're an accounting firm, I can't help you, right? That's your ticket to the game. Be great at that, know what success looks like there, and invest in the human system of success equally. And it takes just as much practice, deliberate practice. It takes just as much focus on understanding your people as pursuing the other stuff does, right? They're really clear. They're often clear on the metrics. They're way less clear on what success looks like for this team. And that's done at each leader level, right?
There is sometimes fear in teams of being too successful, too, in the sense like, what happens if we do achieve this? You mentioned this a little bit earlier. I think sometimes there are teams, there's some fear in like, if this goes too well, and I know that sounds kind of weird, but people will start sabotaging teams when they're afraid, like, oh, if I'll get voted off the island if this team's too successful. I don't feel like I'm a part of that success factor, and I'm going to get voted off the island. So I'm going to start maybe doing some things to tone it down a bit, right? And I think we miss that element in teams too. Is you said this word fear, and there's some unrealistic fear about the consequences of said success. I can't tell you how many times I've done a project and I've had somebody fight me on the project, and when you start getting to the bottom, you realize the success of that project creating a great amount of fear in someone because it changes my world, or I've only been this kind of programmer for this long. What happens when that, the success is replacing that system, but is it really replacing them? That's how they see it, right? That's how they see it. And so you may be seeing sabotage internally based on things that don't make sense because you haven't dug in to say, like, what are you really afraid of in success, right?
In success.
Yeah.
By the way, undermining others is a withdrawal from the team trust bank. And whatever movie you are creating inside your head, and we all create movies, cannot come true. I don't care what disaster movie, what opera you are creating inside your head about what that future is, it will not come true. Not like you imagine it. Not exactly. So stay in the now. Let's focus on where we are. Know that we're going to make it as a team. You're part of the team. You'll be part of the team after, right? We'll find a spot for you to continue to learn and grow. That to me, it still gets back to the unity and managing that movie you create inside your head. And we all do it.
Yeah. I love that. Sometimes it never turns out like you think it's going to.
It's never going to turn out exactly like it's going to. Ever.
One more question for you, and then for those listening live, we're gonna kind of do an extended post show. If you're listening to the recorded version of this will only be available live. Before you get to ask Maureen some questions, we'll just kind of go rapid fire. But Sarah asked this question, and I think just a clarifying question, we'll kind of wrap on this one. Is it everything I could have done or everything I committed to do? Does that resonate with you at all as you look at that, Maureen? And how would you respond to that question?
I think it's a good question. They should be the same thing. If you're committed to the success of the team, eventually they should be the same thing, right? And for example, that coach I struggled with, if we work together again this year, God help me, I will be more committed to making that relationship work. I will take 100% responsibility for making that relationship work. And I didn't do that last year. So there's a mind shift. I could have done things, but I wasn't committed to it either. I gave up on her, right? I got frustrated with her, didn't understand it. So I gave up. And that's on me. That was a bad choice, right? So I think there is a line there, but if we are fully committed to the success of the team, we do everything we can, right? So me included, right?
Yeah. It's such a great, I've been thinking a lot about leadership, and I've been thinking about where lately, or in the past, we were just chatting about this in pre-show, where my leadership has broken down. And oftentimes it's when I've gotten too me centered and not we centered, right?
Yeah,
Talked a lot on Theme Thursday. We talked a lot about this me versus we, and
it's
bringing
important.
that in. And that's what I just heard you say
Oh yeah,
is, you know what? It's going to be difficult. I'm going to own it and do all that I can. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
doesn't work.
I mean, I've done everything I can to make it work, but I'm going to at least put myself in a situation. I think all of us have those opportunities, including this guy, to evaluate those, whether it be with my kids or in my work relationships or the things that I do around the podcasting space, to say, did I do everything I could do? Because trust me, there's been times I've sabotaged things because I just didn't want to do them. So just easier to sabotage them,
Oh my goodness.
and
Yeah, well
say,
that's
yeah, this will fail. Okay,
workload.
it's done. Now let's close the doors and let's move on,
Yeah,
right? Instead
yeah,
of really going at the problem,
right,
agreeing like, yeah, let's not do this anymore, type
right.
deal, as opposed to just
A
sabotaging
dialogue,
it.
which would have
Yeah.
probably worked out
No,
a little
right
bit
on.
better. But one of the challenges of the 100% commitment to the success of the relationship, we're often waiting for that 50% mark. What are they doing, right? But if you own it 100%, then it isn't about what they're doing. Now, it may never work, but I will at least have done 100%, fully committed 100% to the success of that relationship. Not 50% or 25% because they're annoying, right? I'll try a little bit. No, 100%, I'm responsible 100% for the quality of the relationship with that coach. Yuck. Right? I mean, it's not what I want to do, but it's what I have to do.
Right.
All right.
Maureen, thanks for coming out
You're welcome.
today. Again, if you're listening live, hang tight. We'll do some additional questions in the post show. But thank you. Thanks for your time and thanks for your commitment. You've been doing the long game
Aw.
with us for a long time at this point. Always great
You
to
guys have
catch
been
up.
great partners. And
Look,
Jim, you are one of my favorite people, and
appreciate
Blanca
that.
on as well. So
Yeah,
thank you, thank you, thank you.
appreciate
Hopefully I
that.
did Blanca proud.
Always a trusted partner. I know I can just pick up the phone if I or do a Zoom call. These days, nobody picks up the phone anymore.
Not anymore.
That's like, yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
so thank you
Thank you for the
thanks
opportunity,
for being
and
a good
thanks for
friend.
people for showing up. And
Yeah.
success for this was it fun and entertaining and helpful? If it was, we had success today.
Yeah. And maybe as I close things out, drop in chat what you learned. Let's just do that really quick so we can kind of see any takeaways from you. And Jan, I've got your question. We'll cover that here in the post show. With that, we'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we now have available in Gallup Access. Go to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths for coaching, master coaching, or if you want to become a Gallup-Certified Strengths coach, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, and we'll get somebody back with you with some information on that. You can stay up to date with everything that's going on. Follow us on every social platform. Just search Clifton Strengths. If you're listening to this as a podcast, go ahead and subscribe to Called to Coach so you never miss an episode. Or there on YouTube in the corner right down there, there's a subscribe button, and click on that and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss it when we produce these live. Thanks for coming out today, and thanks for being a part of this, Maureen. Thanks again. Always great to spend time with you. Live folks, stay around for a little bit of post show. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.